Okay. My name is Randy Crones, and I'm here to talk to you about archaeology. As archaeologists, we investigate past human societies by looking at the type of objects, or artifacts as we call them, that these people left behind. Imagine you were to leave your house right now, and a few hundred years from now, archaeologists were to return to your house. What types of things might they find? Well, in your kitchen, for example, you might find silverware, your knife, your fork, and your spoon. And that tells us a lot of good information. That tells us that you were able to use metal to make tools. If we were to go to your trash can, we would also find additional information, such as containers or plastic bags of the types of foods you were eating. And ancient societies also made containers, such as this basket, which are really wonderful, but unfortunately don't always preserve very well in the archaeological record. And sometimes we only get part of the story, like this projectile point. It tells us that they were able to work stone, but sometimes that story can be incomplete. In an example like this, we have this war club, which was used in battle, and you can see it has a projectile point in the wood, but chances are, after a couple hundred years, all we would find was this. And that's what's so fascinating about archaeology. We take all these clues and put them together and tell a story that can only be told through archaeology. Do you know how people lived in Florida 50 years ago? About 100 years ago. About 1,000 years ago. Well, you've heard of societies like the Romans and the Egyptians, but what about the people living right here in your backyard? So today I'd like you to become the archaeologist. So come along with me as we explore one of the most powerful and well-known tribes in Florida's deep history, the Calusa. Now we're actually inside the chief's hut. This is very much what the Calusa's houses would have looked like about 1,000 years ago. Well, there's this rope that's holding everything together. Where would they have gotten that rope from? About a couple hundred years ago, or 1,000 years ago, they would have actually had to make this rope. They couldn't just go to the store and buy it. And they actually made it out of the same material that they built their roof out of, which is palm fronds. And they would have taken the palm fronds and separated them out into individual fibers and twisted them together to make this rope. Look at these wooden carvings. These are really beautifully painted, beautifully carved, and you can see that they incorporate other elements of their environment into their artwork, just like they incorporated the materials from their environment into their house. Now, if you look at it, it looks like maybe those are some eyes and possibly an animal, maybe even an alligator. They would have had lots of alligators in their environment, so it's not too much of a stretch to suggest that that's maybe what these represent. Another thing you see is the shell that they've attached. Now, shell is a very important resource to the Calusa people, as we'll find later. The Calusa were also known as the Shell people. So, we just walked in on a ceremony. This is the Calusa leader, Carlos, and he's welcoming a Tequesta leader from about the Miami area. Now, the Calusa were a very fierce, very powerful warrior people, and because of that, they had the entire southwest coast of Florida under their control, and as far inland as Lake Okeechobee. And they'd had tribes all along the east coast of Florida and all the way down to the Florida Keys under their tribute system, which means every now and then the chiefs of those tribes would come and pay tribute to the chief. And that's what they're doing here. In this particular scene here, you can't see what's actually being given as tribute, but what you can see is the particular position that each person is in. Notice the chief and his wife are up high on stools, and that the visiting chief is on a much lower, sort of subservient position, and actually offering up himself in a subservient pose. Darcy, tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here.
We made it to look like a Calusa mound. So what you see are layers of shellfish and fish bones that build up through time. Imagine just going out into a shallow estuary and taking a net and dipping up all those little fish right along the shoreline. You just have instant chowder.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's one of the interesting things about the Calusa is they actually, because of the estuaries, they had so many resources available to them that they didn't necessarily need to have agriculture, right? And they developed a really, really complex and interesting culture. This is your host, Randy Crones, and I hope that you've enjoyed trekking through time and that you've gained a better appreciation for archaeology and history in general. Next time you're walking around, think about who may have lived in your neighborhood hundreds or thousands of years ago.